I woke up to see my 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, lying in her bed with her face bruised and swollen. My heart stopped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The child who brought so much joy and laughter into my life had been harmed, intentionally. And the worst part? It was done by the people who were supposed to love and protect her. My own parents, Lorraine and Victor Whitman. I rushed to her side, my hands trembling as I gently touched her cheeks. "Sophie, what happened?" I whispered, my voice breaking. She looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes, trying to smile through the pain. My stomach turned. She didn't fully understand, but I did. My parents had done this to her. I had known they were obsessed with appearances, always pressuring me to live by their rules. But hurting my child? That crossed every line. Clara Whitman. That's me. I'm 28, a single mother living in a small suburban neighborhood in Ohio. I've worked hard to give Sophie a good life, free from the toxicity I grew up with. But my parents, they never accepted that. They were always controlling, always reminding me of my place, always undermining my choices. And now they had crossed the ultimate line. I thought about Tess, my niece, whose birthday party was coming up. My parents had always been obsessed with perfection, with making sure our family looked flawless to everyone around us. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't random. This was calculated. They wanted Sophie to look ugly, to embarrass me, and to maintain control over me through shame and fear. My anger surged, but so did a fierce protective instinct. Sophie needed me, and I could not let her be hurt again. I lifted her into my arms and held her close, whispering reassurances I didn't entirely believe myself. Tears blurred my vision, not only from worry but from a deep, simmering fury. How could people who gave me life be capable of something so cruel? I paced my living room, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't confront them rashly. They were cunning, manipulative, and they would deny everything. But I also knew I couldn't let this go. I had to find a way to protect Sophie, to make sure my parents could never harm her, or me again. That day marked a turning point. I promised myself that I would not be the helpless victim of my parents' obsession with control and appearances. I would protect my daughter at all costs, and I would ensure that justice was served. But I had to be careful. Any wrong move could make things worse for Sophie. So I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and began to plan. Sophie deserved a mother who would fight for her, and I intended to be that mother, no matter what it took. I sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, holding her close, but my mind kept drifting back to my own childhood. I remembered how my parents, Lorraine and Victor, always made me feel small, as if nothing I did was ever good enough. Sometimes it was subtle, a sigh, a raised eyebrow, a comment that seemed innocent but left me doubting myself for days. Other times, it was more direct, like telling me I wasn't smart enough to make my own decisions. Even now, as an adult, I could feel their control over me. They always insisted I follow the path they approved of, and when I didn't, they made me feel guilty for disappointing them. I had moved out years ago, determined to create my own life, but their influence never completely went away. Visits home were always tense. They would ask about my work, my friends, and my choices in ways that felt like tests I could never pass. When I became a mother, I thought I had escaped their control, but seeing Sophie hurt made me realize they had only hidden their cruelty better. Tess, my niece, came to mind. The last time I went to a Whitman family gathering, my mom had criticized me in front of everyone. She praised Tess and made offhand remarks about how Sophie could learn to behave properly like her cousin. I had felt small, embarrassed, and powerless, but I smiled through it. That smile fooled them, but inside, I was quietly furious. I felt trapped between love and anger. Part of me wanted my parents' approval, the warmth of family, but their cruelty was impossible to ignore. They had always cared more about appearances than love, and now Sophie was paying the price. The thought of what they had done made my blood boil, but I had to keep my anger under control. Losing my head could put Sophie in more danger, and I couldn't risk that. Looking down at my daughter resting her head on my shoulder, too young to understand what she had narrowly escaped, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what my parents said or did, no matter how tangled the family ties were, I would protect Sophie. I would not let them hurt her again. That promise gave me a sense of calm determination, the first real hope I had felt since discovering what had happened. I would find a way to keep Sophie safe, and I would make sure my parents never had control over our lives again. My love for Sophie was stronger than any fear. That love would guide every step I took from now on. I rushed Sophie to urgent care as fast as I could, my heart pounding. She was quiet in my arms, holding on to me tightly, and I kept telling her it would be okay. When the nurses and doctors saw her, their faces went serious. They asked gentle questions, checked her injuries, and then looked at me with concern. The doctor told me the bruises and swelling were consistent with intentional harm. My stomach dropped. I felt a mix of fear and rage. I couldn't believe my own parents could do something so cruel to Sophie. I had always known they could be controlling and cruel in small ways, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. I called my parents, hoping for some explanation, but as usual, they acted innocent. Lorraine's voice was calm, almost fake, and Victor kept saying he didn't understand what I was talking about. They made it seem like I was overreacting. Hearing them lie so easily made my blood boil. I realized then that I was alone. No one else could see what I had seen. No one else could feel what Sophie and I were going through. I was the only one who could protect her and seek justice. After the visit, I sat down with my phone and started taking pictures of Sophie's injuries. I wanted proof, something undeniable. I also began writing down all the times my parents had done small, suspicious things. Times they had undermined me or made strange comments about Sophie. It wasn't just this one incident. There had been a pattern, and I needed to make sure it was all recorded. Every picture, every note, every memory of their control and cruelty added fuel to my determination. My anger grew, but so did my focus. I knew I couldn't let them hurt Sophie or me again. I couldn't confront them without a plan, because they were clever and would twist everything to make it seem like I was overreacting. I needed evidence, witnesses, and a way to make sure they couldn't deny what they had done. I spent the rest of the day thinking and planning. I thought about the people I could reach out to, the proof I could gather, and the ways I could finally expose them. It wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't let fear stop me. Sophie deserved a mother who would fight for her, and I would be that mother. By the evening, I felt a quiet determination settle in me. I would protect Sophie, and I would make sure my parents paid for what they had done. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but I had started the first steps. I had proof, I had notes, and I had a plan forming in my mind. This was only the beginning, and I was ready to do whatever it took to keep Sophie safe and hold my parents accountable. I acted like everything was fine when my parents came over the next day. I smiled, spoke politely, and even thanked them for small things, hiding the storm of anger inside me. I knew they had hurt Sophie, but I couldn't let them see that I knew. If they suspected, they would cover their tracks, and I couldn't afford that. While keeping up appearances, I began to gather more evidence. I recorded conversations quietly when I could, took notes of suspicious things they said, and watched for moments when they let their true selves slip. Every word, every movement, every look became part of the puzzle I was putting together. I had to be careful, but I also had to be thorough. Tessa's mother came into the picture as well. She had always been polite to me, but I realized she supported my parents without knowing the truth. She praised their ways, talked about family appearances, and unknowingly reinforced their control over me. I had to navigate around her carefully, because any wrong word could alert my parents that I was paying close attention. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I was doing. Setting traps for my own parents didn't feel right at times. Part of me hated having to deceive them, even after what they did. But then I looked at Sophie, and all doubts vanished. She depended on me, and I couldn't let my conscience stop me from protecting her. I told myself that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about safety and justice. Every visit, every casual conversation became an opportunity to collect proof. I noticed the way my parents tried to influence others, the way they twisted stories to make themselves look innocent, and the way they underestimated me. I recorded moments they didn't even know were being captured, and I wrote down inconsistencies and lies. I was building a case quietly, carefully, without raising suspicion. By the end of the week, I could feel the tension building in the house. My parents didn't realize that every step they took, every lie they told, was leading them deeper into the trap I was setting. I stayed calm on the surface, even friendly, but inside I was preparing for the moment when I would finally have all the proof I needed. I watched them closely, noticing their pride and confidence, completely unaware that they were walking right into my plan. I had turned their own arrogance against them, and it gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. I knew I had to keep my focus, be patient, and wait for the right moment. They thought they were in control, but in reality, I was quietly guiding the entire situation. With every passing day, my plan grew stronger. I felt a mix of fear and determination, but mostly determination. I couldn't let them know that I had seen through them, and I couldn't let Sophie be hurt again. Soon, everything would fall into place, and my parents would be the ones caught in my carefully set web. I started paying close attention to my parents' behavior, looking for small cracks I could widen. I spoke carefully, dropping subtle hints in conversation that made them question each other. A look, a quiet question, a pause at the right moment, I could see the tension growing between them. They didn't know I was watching, but I could feel them slipping. At first, it was hard to keep calm. I wanted to yell, to confront them, to make them pay immediately. But every time I looked at Sophie, I remembered why I couldn't lose control. Her safety was my priority, and losing my composure would only make things worse. I had to be patient, precise, and clever. I began using small tricks to plant seeds of doubt. I would mention things in passing, as if I wasn't paying attention, and watch how they reacted. Sometimes I would ask a question about something they had said to the other, or mention an incident that might make them worry the other was hiding something. Slowly, I could see it working. Their confident expressions began to falter. I could feel the tension in the air, sharp and uncomfortable, and it gave me a strange satisfaction. One afternoon, I noticed Lorraine snapping at Victor over something minor, a small argument that escalated quickly. Her voice shook with frustration, and Victor looked surprised and defensive. I held back a smile. That little outburst confirmed that my tactics were working. The careful web of doubt I had been weaving was starting to take effect. My parents were beginning to distrust each other, and that gave me a new kind of control. I stayed calm on the outside, friendly even, while inside I felt a mixture of anger and determination. Every tense glance, every hesitation, every small quarrel between them became a tool I could use. I knew that if I stayed patient, I could push their relationship to a breaking point, making it easier to expose them completely. It wasn't easy. Part of me felt guilty for manipulating them, even after everything they had done. But the fear of what they could do to Sophie if I didn't act overpowered any doubts. I reminded myself that this was not just revenge, it was protection. By the end of the week, I could see the changes clearly. Lorraine and Victor were no longer as united as before. They were suspicious, short-tempered, and careful around each other. My plan was working exactly as I had hoped. The power they once held over me was fading, and for the first time, I felt a sense of control. Their cracks gave me leverage, and I knew I could use it to protect Sophie and bring the truth to light. Slowly but surely, I was turning the situation around, using their own fears and pride against them, and it felt like the first real step toward justice. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. My parents were smart, respected, and good at pretending to be caring people. If I wanted the truth to come out, I needed support from people who had seen flashes of their real behavior. So I reached out quietly, choosing my words carefully, making sure nothing reached my parents' ears too soon. I started with a distant cousin who had always avoided family gatherings. When I called her, she sounded surprised but quickly opened up. She admitted she had noticed how my parents treated me over the years and said she had always felt something was off. Hearing someone else confirm what I had felt for so long gave me a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. I wasn't imagining any of it. Others had seen it too. Then I reached out to Jordan, my neighbor. He lived across the street and had seen my parents visiting often. I asked him casually if he had ever noticed anything strange. To my surprise, he told me he had once seen my mom dragging Sophie inside the house roughly while thinking no one was watching. He had debated coming to tell me, but didn't want to cause problems. I felt a chill run through me. It was another piece of truth I needed, and Jordan agreed to talk if things ever reached a serious point. Finally, I called Diana, my childhood friend. She knew my parents well. She had been around when we were younger and had witnessed the controlling comments, the pressure, and the manipulation. When I told her what had happened to Sophie, she didn't doubt me for a second. She said she always sensed something ugly behind their perfect smiles. She promised to help me however she could, even if it meant stepping into the middle of something messy. Trusting people felt strange at first. I had spent so many years dealing with problems alone, trying to avoid my parents' judgment and anger. Letting others in made me feel both lighter and more exposed. But as each person listened and offered support, I felt myself growing stronger. I wasn't alone anymore, and that mattered more than anything. With the pieces coming together, witnesses, stories, old experiences, and new signs, I could finally see a way forward. I started building a clearer plan, one that didn't rely on guesses or emotions, but on real, undeniable evidence. My parents had always counted on everyone believing their perfect image. But now I had people who were ready to show the truth with me. For the first time, I felt like I had a real chance. I had allies. I had proof. And I was ready to take the next step toward confronting them with everything they had tried to hide. I decided to invite my parents to Sophie's birthday party, pretending it was just a normal family gathering. I spent days planning every detail, making sure everything looked cheerful and ordinary. I wanted them to feel comfortable, to think nothing was wrong, while I quietly prepared to expose them. On the day of the party, I smiled and welcomed them as warmly as I could. My parents, Lorraine and Victor, didn't suspect a thing. Sophie ran around laughing, completely unaware of the danger she had narrowly escaped. Seeing her happy and innocent made it easier to hide my anger. I focused on keeping my composure, speaking politely, laughing when they made jokes, all while keeping my mind sharp and ready. I set small situations to see their true reactions. When my parents tried to talk about Sophie, I asked pointed questions, just casually, as if I didn't know anything. I watched closely as their faces changed, as their carefully constructed lies started to crack under the pressure. They didn't realize I was paying attention to every word, every glance, every subtle move. I arranged the seating so a few trusted friends and family members were near enough to notice any strange behavior. Jordan and Diana were quietly observing, ready to back up anything I would reveal later. I didn't draw attention to them, but their presence gave me confidence. I could see small slips from my parents, looks, short pauses, changes in tone, things they didn't think anyone else noticed. My parents began acting differently as the party went on. Lorraine whispered to Victor nervously, and Victor kept glancing around, clearly unsettled. They still thought I was unaware, still believed they were in control. But I could feel their unease growing, and I knew the web I had set was working. Their arrogance was turning into fear, just as I had hoped. I even let Sophie ask my parents little questions about the gifts and games, and I could see them stumbling to answer, trying to appear kind and loving while revealing their impatience and discomfort. Each moment was a small victory for me, proof that my plan was unfolding perfectly. By the end of the party, I had gathered enough observations and reactions to confirm my suspicions. Their lies, their cruelty, and their obsession with appearances were all becoming visible, not just to me but to the people who were watching quietly. I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. After everyone left, I cleaned up calmly, smiling at Sophie and making sure she felt loved and safe. Inside, I was preparing myself for the next step, the final confrontation. I had set the trap, and now my parents had walked right into it. Soon, all the truth would come out, and they wouldn't be able to hide from the consequences any longer. I gathered everyone in the living room, family, friends, and the people I knew would support me. I took a deep breath and made sure Sophie was close to me. She looked up at me with trusting eyes, and I felt a surge of determination. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I started calmly, explaining that I had discovered something serious, something no one should ever have to face. I showed the photos of Sophie's injuries, the recordings of my parents' conversations, and the notes I had taken about their past behavior. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I spoke with control, letting the evidence speak for itself. At first, my parents acted surprised, pretending innocence, but the room was quiet, tense. Lorraine's hands trembled and Victor's face turned red. Every lie they tried to use to cover themselves failed. The recordings played, the photos were undeniable, and the testimonies from Jordan, Diana, and others made it clear they couldn't deny the truth. I could see the shock and panic spread across their faces. They had always thought they were clever, always thought no one would see their cruelty. Now they were exposed in front of people they cared about, and I felt a strange calm as I watched them struggle. Their pride and control crumbled under the weight of the truth. Sophie clung to me during the entire confrontation, her small hand in mine. I wanted her to see that she was safe, that her mother would never let anyone hurt her again. I spoke to my parents firmly, making it clear that their actions were unacceptable and that they would never threaten our family again. My voice was steady, controlled, and strong, and I could see Sophie's eyes widen with understanding and relief. She felt my strength, and I knew she understood that we were safe together. My parents tried to argue, tried to twist the situation, but the evidence left no room for denial. Every person in the room had seen enough to understand the truth. I could see them shrinking under the judgment of everyone around them, realizing that their power over me and Sophie was gone. After the confrontation, I held Sophie close and whispered that we were okay now. The fear that had weighed on us was lifting. I felt a mix of relief and pride. I had faced my parents, revealed the truth, and protected my daughter. I made it clear to them one last time that their behavior would never be allowed again. They had no power over us anymore. Sophie saw her mother fight for her, and in that moment, she understood safety, justice, and strength. I had taken control, and I would never let them hurt my family again. After the confrontation, the change was immediate. My parents' carefully maintained image in the family and community started to crumble. People who had once admired them now looked at them with suspicion. I made sure the truth reached the right people, neighbors, extended family, and anyone who had ever been influenced by their charm. I shared facts calmly, without exaggeration, letting the evidence speak for itself. I didn't need to attack them. The truth alone was enough. Sophie's well-being became my main focus. I spent more time with her than ever, creating routines full of laughter, comfort, and reassurance. I wanted her to feel safe and loved, to know that she could trust the world around her because I would always protect her. Every hug, every bedtime story, every simple moment was a reminder that we had survived and were stronger for it. There was a bittersweet feeling inside me. On one hand, I felt relief and satisfaction knowing justice had been done. My parents could no longer manipulate or hurt us, and the burden of fear that had weighed on us for so long was lifted. On the other hand, I mourned the family we had lost. The ties were broken, and some relationships could never be repaired. It was hard to accept that the people who had once been my closest family were gone in every meaningful way. I leaned on the allies who had supported me throughout, Jordan, Diana, and others who had quietly stood by me. Their support was invaluable, and our bond grew stronger during this difficult time. We celebrated small victories, shared concerns, and planned for the future, knowing that together we could face anything. Their presence reminded me that family wasn't just defined by blood. It was also defined by trust, loyalty, and love. I also made sure my parents' own community knew the truth without doing anything illegal. I shared my evidence carefully, ensuring that people understood their cruelty and manipulation. I didn't seek revenge through lies or gossip. I simply let the facts speak, and their reputation suffered as a natural consequence. It was a quiet victory, knowing that justice had reached beyond our home. As days passed, I felt a new sense of freedom. I was no longer bound by fear or manipulation. Every choice I made was for Sophie and for myself. I could plan our lives without worrying about my parents' interference. We created new traditions, new routines, and a sense of stability that had been missing for years. Looking forward, I felt hope. I had built a life where Sophie and I were safe, where love and protection came first. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer controlled us. I had fought for my daughter, for our future, and I knew that we could face whatever came next, together, fearless and free. Life slowly began to feel normal again, but it was a new kind of normal. Sophie and I started creating our own traditions, little routines that made our home feel warm and safe. Birthday parties, weekend outings, and simple evenings reading together became special in ways they never had before. I wanted Sophie to grow up surrounded by love and security, without the shadow of my parents' cruelty hanging over us. Every day, I reflected on everything I had been through. Standing up to my parents had taken more courage than I ever thought I had. I remembered the fear I felt when I first realized what they had done, the anger that simmered inside me, and the careful planning it took to protect Sophie. It wasn't easy to face them and expose the truth, but doing so had changed me. I had learned that protecting my daughter was worth every moment of stress and doubt, and that strength could come from love as much as from anger. I also noticed the small ways my parents' obsession with appearances was backfiring. People who had once admired their image were now questioning them. Invitations were no longer extended, gossip followed them wherever they went, and their carefully built reputation began to crumble. I didn't have to do anything else. The truth had already taken care of it. Seeing that, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served, not through lies or revenge, but simply by revealing the truth. Sophie seemed happier than ever. I watched her play, laugh, and talk about her friends, and I realized how much lighter our lives had become. The fear that had once weighed on her tiny shoulders was gone, and in its place was trust. Trust in me, trust in her own safety, and trust in the life we were building together. At night, I would hold her close and think about how far we had come. I silently promised her that no matter what happened, I would always fight for her. I would always make sure she was protected, loved, and free from anyone who tried to hurt her. That promise gave me a sense of peace and purpose that I had never felt before. Looking back, I understood that the betrayal I had faced had revealed my true strength. I had learned that courage was not about being fearless, but about standing firm even when fear was present. Our home was finally ours, and every step forward was a choice we made together. I felt empowered, knowing that we could face the future with confidence. My parents' control over our lives was gone, and nothing could take it back. I had protected Sophie, exposed the truth, and built a life based on love and safety. And in my heart, I promised that I would continue to fight for her, no matter what. Our story was one of justice, strength, and freedom, and it was only the beginning of the life we deserved.